This might be the unholiest of rants that I have ever done. I'm talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake, which came out in 2010. The beginning of this film is we meet this character, Dean, played by Kellen Lutz, and he's in a diner. He's having messed up dreams, and he's talking to this character, Chris, and he's telling her what's going on. She's trying to be there for him and help him. He falls asleep and is being stalked by this guy with knives for hands, and he's going after him. And then everyone else in the diner witnesses Dean cut his own throat while he's asleep. What? This is your opening. So we cut to now the character Chris, who he was talking to, played by Katie Cassidy, and at Dean's funeral is when she finds this photo. And in this photo is all of these characters as kids from preschool. And she doesn't remember knowing them or Dean that long ago, so all of this seems odd. Chris starts to have dreams about Freddy now, and there's even one time she has a dream in class, and it's a decent effect of her being asleep, everyone around her, and then they all turn into dust. Sure, it's overly CGI'd, and that's a huge major flaw of this film is how much it does rely on CGI. But in the dream, she looks up, she sees Freddy at the top of the class. It's our first real good look at Freddy. I guess we'll get to him in a minute. She screams and wakes up, and her ex-boyfriend, Jesse, is trying to comfort her, trying to be there for her. Let's be honest, he's using this breakdown that she's having to try to get in there, to try to spend a night with her. In fact, he does. I don't know for sure if they had sex, but it sure does look like it. And she has another dream about Freddy chasing after her, going after her. And they recreate the Tina death. This is hard to watch because it is such a lesser version than. I know that it's a remake, so I know you want to pay homage or you want to pay respects in some sense to the original. But when you're just copying and pasting, or when you're just trying to do the same scene, but you're doing it in a worse way, it's hard, man, because all it does is it makes me want to pop in the original, the better directing that went on there, and to see, because the old one was practical and looked more real, to just watch that. So Chris dies. She doesn't even get dragged along the walls and the ceilings. All she does is she rises up from the bed. She gets tossed around from wall to wall, just thrown around in a silly, comically bad way. And then her stomach gets slashed and she falls and dies. Jesse is now covered in blood. He freaks out. He runs to Nancy's house. Why the hell would you do this? You're not even really good friends with Nancy. Why is she the first person that you run to? Oh, because Nancy's the main character. He tells her what happened. He tells her not to fall asleep. He tells her about this guy, Freddy. Then he leaves and he gets arrested. Good. He's covered in blood. Idiot didn't even have the sense to change clothes. And it's weird because he immediately gets put into prison. And I don't know how this happens so fast. I mean, he's in a prison system with a cellmate. Like this happens way too fast. He would at least be in a jail cell by himself or with a bunch of other criminals who are arrested that night or maybe a couple days before. But no, they give him an orange jumpsuit. It's the whole deal. But of course he falls asleep and Freddy kills him in the boiler room. Let's talk about Nancy, though, who is our main character. She's played by Rooney Mara. And I've said this before. I've said this countless times. If I hadn't seen Rooney Mara in any other film besides this one, if this was the only movie that I saw Rooney Mara act in, I would think that she is one of the worst actresses that I have ever seen. She is unconvincing, unbelievable as not only Nancy, but just as a main character. But even more so with Nancy, Nancy is your strong protagonist. Nancy is one of the best parts of that original film. You have to do her character justice. You have to make her strong. You have to make her capable. And you have to make us give a shit about her. And Rooney Mara, for some reason, she is just not interested. She seems like she doesn't even want to be here. Maybe her producer or maybe her agent told her it was a good idea to do this film, but she knew it was some bullshit. And she's coasting. She's so unemotional. She's so detached from any feelings at all. She goes and starts to look up her past and look up this whole situation with this picture and these kids. And she finds out that they all went to preschool together. And that's where she spends more time with her friend Quentin, who's played by Kyle Gallner. Good actor. In fact, him next to Rooney Mara, he's acting circles around her, so you almost wish that he was the main character. Hell, Katie Cassidy, I'm not even saying she's the greatest actress ever, but even she was acting circles around Rooney Mara, and that's shocking to me because Rooney Mara is amazing in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Nancy and Quentin, they both don't remember any of this school stuff, any of this childhood stuff, and it's odd, right? It's odd that all of these characters would have no memory of this. I know what suppressed memories are. I heard that if people who have gone through traumatic like things, that they do want to forget it, that they can push those memories and those thoughts so far past that it is non-existent. It's not there anymore. And that's okay, fine. Maybe if Nancy was the one who didn't remember, or if a couple of these kids didn't remember, but not one of these kids has any recollection, has any memory of being together in preschool or this Freddy Krueger situation. How doesn't Quentin say, hey guys, what are you talking about? We all have known each other for years. We all went to school together. Yeah, we were all abused by this one guy. And maybe that's where the doubt comes in, or maybe that's where the situation gets brought up. But no, they have to talk to Nancy's mom, who's super sketchy and not trustful. And she tells them about Fred, and tells them about the preschool, tells them that he used to work at the preschool and that he was accused of abusing them. She even tells her that Nancy was his favorite and all of this stuff. And it just, if the parents, if their whole plan was to make the kids forget, why would she even tell her this right now? I know they were starting to discover stuff and they were starting to ask too many questions, but it's odd. It makes everyone look dumb. It makes everyone look unlikable. Quentin goes to his father, played by Clancy Brown, no less. What a waste. And he blames his father. He says, it's your fault because we were just kids and we were probably just lying. And so you guys took the law into your own hands and you killed an innocent man. And that's how he's able to come back. And that's how he's killing us. And I know people don't like this, the idea that Freddy was innocent and that he didn't really do anything wrong and he didn't deserve to be killed. But I honestly found that to be the most interesting thing about this movie, or one of the most interesting things, because, hey, it kind of makes sense how he got the powers to come back, to go into dreams, and to kill these kids. It is out of revenge. That at least has logic to it, but no. That's not really why it's here. In fact, I don't even know why that's here. I don't know why they have doubt on whether Freddy is innocent or not. I don't know why that's introduced at all. And Quentin falls asleep at some point and he witnesses the origin scene of Freddy, how he was chased down by the parents and ran into this warehouse, locked himself in. All of the parents burned the place down, burned him alive. You get this horrible, goofy shot of Freddy ripping his jacket off to reveal the red and green sweater. And the way how they play it up in slow motion and how it's his destiny, so horrible. Don't overdo it, guys. It's just very, very cheesy. Let's talk about Jackie Earle Haley, shall we? Jackie Earle Haley, great actor. You've seen him in a bunch of other stuff, and he pulls off those roles well. But as Freddy Krueger, there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of problems. Obviously, the original actor, Robert Englund, you can't top him. He's been Freddy for so many years, for so long. We all grew up with him. That to replace him or to make somebody else play the character, you have to have a good reason for it. You have to give me a reason why you don't just bring back Robert Englund. And Jackie Earle Haley is giving a performance that doesn't justify that. He has this deep voice that sounds exactly identical to his Rorschach voice from Watchmen, which was a great character, but does not fit Freddy Krueger. This voice does not fit. It's just raspy and deep just because there's no personality really to his Freddy character. He's written to have some sexual jokes or some awkward comments that makes him creepy, but you introduced that he's probably innocent. So those jokes and those comments don't really work, and because he's playing it so serious, it doesn't give off any comedic effect at all. His makeup, the burnt face, I think looks terrible. I know that he was burnt in real life, and so they want to go for a more realistic look, but it doesn't look good. It doesn't look cinematic. You don't see any facial expressions or any personality to his face. You can't switch this character up so much to where he's almost unrecognizable. I know people are going to complain or defend this film and say, well, do you want changes or do you want the original over again? The point is, I don't want either or. I don't want changes to the original, and I don't want them to redo it. So overall, any changes that are made are just lazy, are just the weakest excuse to do some stuff that to me doesn't make sense, that aren't creative. Speaking of creative, these dreams are some of the laziest dreams ever. Nancy falls asleep at one point and she walks into her bedroom and it's snowing. And that's the most creative thing that any of these dreams do. Every time that either character falls asleep, they either wind up at the preschool or they wind up in this damn boiler room. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this boiler room. There's no imagination. Think about all of the possibilities that you can do with dreams in general. Inception proved that you can go virtually anywhere. And this film just takes the easy route. It just takes the lazy route. It's the original films and its sequels, even if you don't like some of the sequels, at least they went creative with the dreams. At least they went hardcore with it. They went to the depths of hell in some cases. And they rely too much on jump scares. There's so many points where a character is walking around in their dream, they turn, and Freddy just pops up. Or there's one scene where Quentin is at a library, and he sees Freddy sitting down at a table, and Freddy just turns his head, and that's supposed to be a jump scare. Really? How old am I that that's supposed to scare the living shit out of me? And when I mentioned before about being original or recreating scenes, there's a few scenes where they do just flat out rip off scenes from the original, like Nancy falling asleep in the bathtub, and they just shot for shot redo Wes Craven's shot that he at this point was so upset. He wasn't even asked to be a consultant or an executive producer. He said he watched this movie and was so upset that they just ripped off so much of his stuff and they didn't even have him involved in it. And that's what sucks. It shows that these people that made this film, they weren't for the franchise. They weren't for the character. They weren't for the fans. No, they wanted to make a cash grab. They wanted to make an easy buck, and they just ripped this scenes off. Nancy on her own goes to look up the other kids in the picture from the preschool, and she discovers that they're all dead. And it's like they all died off screen. She reads these articles about how they died and the various ways they died, which all seem more creative than anything we've seen in the film. She even sees a video blog of one of the kids who dies. And it begs the question, why did they do that? Why didn't they, if this was a remake, if this was a reboot and they were going to continue the franchise, I mean, I believe the plan was to make sequels after this. Wouldn't you have kept these kids alive for Nancy to go off and find them in the sequels? And you can have more characters brought in and more people who are deeply connected to Freddy in some way. But no, they have this idea of these classmates and they've already killed them off screen before the movie even got started. Is the idea of micro naps. This is something that when they talked about how if you're awake for 3 or 4 days in a row, your brain will just start to shut off. And I believe this is a real thing where you can't function that long without sleep, and your brain might fall into a coma. So as these characters are awake, they start to slip into the dream world. And there's one scene in particular where Nancy is in a store. She's trying to find something to keep herself awake, any drug, just anything. And she starts to slip into a micro nap. And the scene where she's looking down the aisle of the store, and it starts to flicker and go into the boiler room, and Freddy starts to appear in and out. There's even one part where he swings his arm and knocks stuff off of the counter, which I don't know how that's possible, but it's a cool effect. It's a cool look. It's shot pretty well, and she even gets slashed by him in the process. This is something that they should have went more into. They should have delved deeper into this. It's the most interesting thing you have, and you really only have one scene where you where you explore it. Of course, after she gets cut, they bring her to the hospital. They really just go there to steal some drugs and adrenaline to use later on. So after all of this back and forth, they wind up at the preschool. At the preschool that I guess is still around, just not being used anymore. Hasn't been knocked down, no nothing. And in the preschool, they discover this hidden room. And in the hidden room, they find Freddy's photos. They find the pictures that prove that he did, in fact, molest them. He did, in fact, abuse them. So again, all of that talk over Freddy is innocent. All of that talk over, hey, maybe he didn't do this, and maybe this is how he's able to come back. Hey, maybe the kids lied. Hey, maybe the parents did the wrong thing. All of that's undone. So Nancy has a plan. She decides she's going to go to sleep, go into the dream world, go after Freddy, bring him out, and then kill him, which we have seen that before in past films. Okay, fine. Quentin is supposed to sit there and stay awake for her, but he falls asleep. And I know this is what Johnny Depp does in the original film with Nancy. He's supposed to watch her, but he falls asleep. But it's weirder here because Quentin just shot himself up with adrenaline. And so I don't know how many hours it's been since he did that versus now, but he's already asleep. He already falls asleep. What kind of adrenaline are we talking about? So he falls asleep. Freddy goes after him, attacks him. Of course, he winds up in the boiler room as well. And then we go back to Nancy, and she's now dressed up like a little girl in this dress, and Freddy wants her to be like that. She's his favorite, all of this stuff. You get this really creepy scene of Freddy forcing her on the bed, and he's suggesting that he's going to spend the rest of time raping her because she's been awake for so long that now she can't wake up. And Quentin just magically wakes up, though. He wakes up and he uses the last of the adrenaline to stick it into Nancy. She wakes up and she brings Freddy into the real world. She grabs this blade and cuts his neck. And she says the line, "Welcome to my world, bitch," which is a cool line, but the problem is that we've already seen somebody do this in Freddy vs. Jason. We've already had a main character recite the same line in the same badass way. All right, whatever. That's how Freddy dies? Really? Who's not severely underwhelmed when they see an ending like that? The last scene of the film is Nancy's mom bringing her back home, and she's trying to talk to her, reassure her that everything's going to be okay, that everything's over, until Nancy sees Freddy in the mirror behind her, and Freddy comes out of the mirror, digs his claws into her mom's face, and then drags her into the mirror, and the mirror puts itself back together, which I don't know how that's possible. Hell, I don't even know how any of this is possible, how Freddy killing her mom is possible, because neither character is asleep. None of them are dreaming. This is terrible. None of this is well thought out. None of this was set up and planned. No wonder why, even though it made a lot of money, and this movie did, but the reviews were so bad. The fan reaction, they were so pissed off. Hell, fans are still pissed off about this movie because we haven't gotten another Nightmare on Elm Street anything since. We feel like the character was done dirty. So guys, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of A Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake? Did you like it, or do you agree that it totally, absolutely reeks of suctitude? Like, comment, subscribe. Later!